Welcome to the Alice and Bob podcast, where we find the person in the black hoodie and talk more about that human behind the keyboard. This week, I'm joined by Shir Tamari, Head of Research at Wiz. Shir is an experienced cybersecurity professional who's filled various roles in developing and researching cybersecurity products, specializes in vulnerability research and application security. And we've got some fantastic chat around his findings today and responsible disclosure. So, Shir, welcome to the podcast, and please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started.
Thank you, Karl. It's an honor to be here. So my name is Shir. I'm 31 years old from Israel, and I'm a computer hacker. And this is how I define myself. I search for threats, risks, and everything that could endanger our industry and the community. I mostly search for high impact security issues, the ones that has the most severity, and I'm very satisfied by that. I'm doing it. First, it's very challenging for me to search and spot and to detect those new risks, and it's also very satisfying that I can assist and help the industry to protect against those security issues.
And we're really thankful that you do. And I know we're going to talk about this later on, but you've had some incredible research and vulnerabilities you've discovered. Just thinking, you must have got started in security at quite a young age. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about how you got started with security.
All right. So I was born I was born in the 90s, and I think it was a great era to start with computers. And somewhere I think in the age of 11, I just finished middle school, and my mom and my best friend's mom decided to send us to a summer camp of website building summer camp. Until then, I had some experience with computers. I had a computer at home. I was playing a lot of computer games, but I think this summer school was my entry into the computer world. We learned HTML, Macromedia Flash, Photoshop in a 3 weeks camp. And this is where I remember the exact moment when I was actually discovering for the first time that there is something that's called hacking. And at that moment, I decided that this is what I want to do.
Sounds like quite a fun summer camp as well. I don't think I've ever heard of three weeks of intense design, development. Let's get you started and get you straight to a job. And I had, as we spoke before, you mentioned you used to play a lot of video games, and I believe one of your first exploits was through hacking old Counter-Strike servers. Is that correct?
Yes, it wasn't my first. It was like 3 years, 4 years into the game that I really liked Counter-Strike, specifically 1.6, the old classic version. And at that time, I mean, the cool kids added their own servers where they can change the maps and decided and do tournaments. And I really wanted my own. And I thought it could be cool to try to hack Counter-Strike servers. So the first thing I was doing was brute forcing the passwords for Counter-Strike servers, but it wasn't that successful. And then later I discovered a much more sophisticated way to gain access, and it's surprisingly was by finding a cross-site scripting vulnerability in one of the most common admin panels for managing Counter-Strike servers.
Wow.
So would you like to listen? Would you like to hear the technical details?
Yeah, please. That sounds really interesting. Not just because I love Counter-Strike, but I think it's quite fun that you saw that at what? 15? You said 3 or 4 years into your career? 15, 16?
So, yeah, something like that. I think it was around 2005.
Gosh, wow.
Okay, so back in the days, I mean, I believe a lot of our audience don't really know Counter-Strike 0.6, or maybe they know, but not the admin panel of managing those servers. But back in the days, it was very common to install mods on Counter-Strike servers. And one of the most common words was webmin. Webmin was a model that you can install on your server, and then you can manage it through the web browser. So the admin will serve the IP and the port of the Counter-Strike server, and they will see a control panel where they can kick players, change maps, and one of the features there was a list of all the players that is actively playing in the game. So I already had a very good website building experience, and I thought it could be cool to try to put HTML tags in my name, in my player name. And then when the admin will manage the server and they will see the list of the players playing it, my HTML code will be executed on their side. And I use that to steal the cookie of the admin, which contained the recon password. And that was the first step. Yeah, it was very, very fun. The second step was also to change the names of all the players playing the game, because admin in Counter-Strike can execute Counter-Strike commands on the clients. And by changing their names, once they are playing they're moving to other servers and playing in other servers, they will steal the admin cookie for me. And eventually I had 700 Counter-Strike 1.6 servers.
It must have been so much fun as well. Good harmless fun, I imagine, at that time of your life.
Definitely.
What was the moment then you kind of took that experience and thought, do you know, I could do this as a career? How did that kind of take off for you? How did you really make that from a passion to a profession?
So I think as a kid, I dropped school in the age of 16. I didn't really. I graduated eventually. I mean, not fully graduated, but I went to the exams outside of school. And I think I knew at that point that I know I have some advantage. I know some things that was like that I can bring value. And that gave me a lot of confidence as a kid. I knew that I'm going to work in this industry. I know that this is what I want to do. And after finishing the army in Israel, the military is mandatory, and I did 5 years of service. And after finishing my army service, there was so much opportunities, especially in Israel, where we have a lot of cyber security companies. There was a lot of opportunities to use my knowledge and also to do what I love in the industry and to bring value.
Amazing. And did you have a lot of support? You said there was a lot of, obviously, cybersecurity companies in Israel. How did your parents and friends and family feel when you said you were going to go into this kind of career and get to where you are today?
So at the beginning, I can say, like, I can tell, like, I can share that from my parents' point of view. They were at the beginning, they were a bit like confused about the idea that someone that didn't graduate, that didn't finish high school, that didn't went to college, will start working in the high-tech industry. But very short after I released from the army and I joined my first role in the industry, they feel very confident. And yeah, I mean, in Israel we have a lot of cybersecurity companies, and also in the military I was serving with very, very good, like I want to say, like, the top talent in Israel, in my age, so basically, like, my friends, my close circle, we all shared the same, not just passion, but also the same, we were from the same circle. We all went after the army to work in the high tech, and so I don't really need. The support was general from the community. Yeah,
sounds like a really good community to be a part of, particularly, I guess, at that time where things were on such a huge growth trajectory for you. Do you ever kind of look back and think to your days at that computer camp and think, were you aware of what was happening outside of your computer camp? You know, I think you mentioned about the pranks you played with kind of Counter-Strike Go and being able to sort of troll other people. Were you ever aware before your military service that hackers were out there using technology to do much more malicious things?
Yeah, of course. Also as a kid, learning. I mean, everything I learned in cybersecurity was from online communities about these things. Like, there's a lot of ebook content, also a lot like web forums and boards where people communicate and share knowledge. But there is also a lot of websites that I believe are still active until today, where a lot of people share and talk about cybersecurity. And back then I was wingness, like people that using it to do bad things, that do illegal things. I remember people approaching me with requests to share with them zero-day exploits and to help them to steal data. So I mean, I was aware of that also as a kid. And back then, I mean, cybersecurity was not as advanced as it's today, but it still got news cover. And sometimes you can see like cybersecurity companies being interviewed in the news. So I knew there is like an old industry that work in that subject.
Let's revisit the period after you got out of the military. So I understand that you did consulting, not just for security companies, but also for different organizations. How did that opportunity to kind of get into that work come around? And what were the sort of things that you noticed in your approach there?
One of the veterans of my military, someone that is 10 years older than me, he opened like a services company that did software development, mostly for companies in the cybersecurity area. So just after releasing from the army, he gave me an offer to become a software developer. The company was called Northbit, and 1 year after I joined, it was acquired by Magic Leap, which used to be a big thing back then. So it was very easy to enter and also to get my first role. I wasn't that good. I mean, I was okay, but I had a lot to learn. Also, software development in the army was less ordered or less like methodology. There was less methodologies than in the industry. In the industry they did much more efficient work and much more like it was a lot. There was a lot of things to learn and to get better. After 1 year at Northbit, I decided that I want to open my own, to start my own journey, and I became a consultant. And I worked with a lot of companies, a lot of known companies also in Israel that do software security and enterprise security.
I mean, it really sounds like you had quite a fun sort of career exit leaving the military and prepared you really well for your current role. So it led to you joining Wiz. Can you just tell us a bit more about Wiz and the sort of emerging technologies and techniques that you have found important?
Okay, so Wiz is a relatively new company. We started in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. I joined Wiz in the end of 2020. After my commander in the army is one of the co-founders, Inon Kostika. After he talked to me and told me like, stop doing these things you're doing and join us. Wiz is a fascinating company. We are doing a platform to protect companies that shifted to the cloud. And we have a lot, all the basic things, not just the basic, everything that companies that move to the cloud needs, from vulnerability management to compliance, to secret scanning, to real-time detections of events, everything combined in one platform. The company is built on the top talent I'm aware of in Israel. We work very hard and we have great achievements. So yeah, now we are like 650 people in the company.
Gosh, in what? Just 3 years, 2 years, 4 years, maybe?
Yeah, no, less than 3.
Wow, congratulations! That's absolutely incredible, like a rocket ship. Um, so you mentioned you're kind of you're thinking about everything that exists in the cloud, and a big part of your role is to research vulnerabilities. How do you kind of identify where to start that work? What drives you? Is it things like bug bounties, or are there kind of other methods of becoming interested in finding something to find a vulnerability in?
Okay, so first I would like to mention like the main differentiator between on-prem environment and cloud environments. Companies who shifted to the cloud, they start using a lot of new software, a lot of new services. They modify it, they change their architecture. And usually security holes will be in those places, in those overlooked places or new places where the DevOps team or the security team or the developers, they start using a new service. They don't fully understand the new service. They don't fully understand how to configure the new service. And this is a place to find a lot of security issues. So there is one of the most common security issues in the cloud is it's publicly accessible resources. So the most common ones, for example, is exposed buckets, but it could be exposed identity providers or misconfigured identity providers or a container registry that is publicly accessible. So in order to find those, you need to actually use and to test the new tools, the new capabilities that the cloud provides us, and to start to assess, like to understand the software, to understand the new software, to follow the documentation, to try to think like where me as a DevOps or as a developer can make a mistake. What would be like the hardest for a security role in the organization? What would be the hardest to monitor, difficult to monitor, to govern? And this is how we actually, this is the main approach to find the overlooked places where companies might did the wrong thing and didn't configure their cloud the right way. And also we take all the new technologies that companies are using because they start working with the cloud. They change their deployment method. They change their CI/CD pipeline. We take all the new software and we learn about it. We analyze it and we find vulnerabilities. Sometimes we find zero-day vulnerabilities, then we report them and disclose them with the vendors, and then sharing it also with the community. Sometimes we find misconfigurations. This is where we add it to the product as to bring value to our customers, but eventually also sharing those with the community. So not just our customers will be protected against those. And this is basically the work, to find new risks.
Find the risks and disclose them properly. I was going to ask actually around that. You say you disclose them to the vendor and to the community. Just for our listeners, can you help people understand what it means to make a responsible disclosure, and some advice or tips that you would have for individuals coming forward to organizations with those vulnerabilities?
Of course. So a responsible disclosure is the process where a researcher reports a security issue or a vulnerability to a vendor who is responsible to fixing those issues. It's very important to do responsible disclosure because if you do like a full disclosure out of nowhere, malicious actors and attackers could use this information and hack a lot of users, organizations, companies based on the researcher information. So it's very important to make sure that the vulnerabilities are fixed and mitigated, and also to do a good effort to wait for customers to apply the fix. Because sometimes we have a new vulnerability. For example, someone can disclose a new vulnerability to Microsoft. Microsoft will fix it, but still will not release a patch. It's very good. Researchers should wait until the patch is publicly available for the companies. Now, maybe if I'm thinking about like a good tip about responsible disclosure, is to work very closely with the vendor. It really depends on how attention the bug hunter or the researchers how much attention they can actually invest in this report. We try to do our best and to invest a lot in the report and in the disclosure process. It's very important to invest in it, because then you can actually verify that the vendor fixed the vulnerability the right way. You can ensure that you can work on the communication and make sure that the researcher they have a full understanding of the issue. And also it helps. A lot of times we see that because companies with a very mature and very popular bug bounty programs, they get a lot of reports. So it's very difficult for them to, because it's a running process, it's very difficult for them to ensure that the vulnerabilities are they didn't fix just one instance of the vulnerability. It's very difficult for them to actually measure and to see that the vulnerability is fixed. That pattern, that the vulnerability is not just a unique instance, and it might be a pattern that they might want to fix in other places. And with the researchers, we do that. We actually make sure that we ask them like the tough questions, like, do you think this vulnerability could occur in other places? How can we ensure that if it's a pattern, that all other places are protected? And this is a very good way. We actually succeeded that in multiple times to ensure that not just the vulnerability that we reported was fixed, but the entire attack surface was redacted, and also making their product much more secure in the future. And also, I think it's a good tip. If you want, you can think about more.
No, it's fantastic tips for our listeners. It's really made me think as well about the accountability that a vendor has to fix the vulnerability that you've discovered. And I wondered, is that part of the reason you like to almost broadcast and share the vulnerabilities that you find, with particularly whilst working at Wiz? And how do you think that helps that dynamic of holding somebody accountable for delivering a fix to their software?
Okay, first of all, sharing research with the community is a very important aspect of protecting the community. Let's say we have I report a vulnerability that is in a specific software, and I report it to a vendor, and now the vendor needs to make sure that their customers are applying the fix, that they're applying the update. So sharing it with the community, sharing the impact, the clear impact of the vulnerability, even specify numbers, like thousands of organizations are affected by this vulnerability. It will help attract attention, and it will help ensure that customers apply the fix. So for every vulnerability that requires an action by the customer, by the user, it's very important to share it, to talk about it, and to share about it. Not just for the sake of transparency, but also to actually help them protect their environments. Some vulnerabilities does not require a fix by the customers. For example, a vulnerability in the backend of a provider, and that is a different aspect. It's more about transparency, that people will know that those vulnerabilities are possible. People will take it in conclusion. I think basically being transparent about security issues, about how companies took the security issue in consideration, how did they handle it. It reflects a very good insights for their customers and for the community.
You've had some very high-profile vulnerabilities that have been had quite or potential to have a significant impact in the world, such as ChaosDB and OMIGOD exploits. Can you tell us a bit about both of those and sort of how you came to discover them and how that disclosure played out?
Definitely. So I will start with the OMIGOD vulnerability. It's a vulnerability that was found by Nir Orfeld, one of the security researchers in my team. He discovered that Azure, the Microsoft Cloud, tend to install a piece of software, we call it middleware, on customers' virtual machines in order to provide customers with advanced support and advanced functionalities to manage their virtual machines, to manage their servers. Now, this piece of software, the OMI agent, was not written that good. It was written in C. It was very easy to find their vulnerabilities. We found 4 vulnerabilities. 3 of them was local privilege escalation vulnerabilities, which could allow a low privileged user to escalate their privileges to root access on the instance. And one specific vulnerability was a remote code execution vulnerability that was very simple to exploit. It was basically removing one header from an HTTP request, and you get root access to the remote machine. Now, after we disclosed these vulnerabilities to Microsoft, it took them time to fix and to provide a fix to the vulnerability. And then I think like the big story was that Microsoft announced the patch and the fix in a Patch Tuesday. It was back in September 2021, and customers didn't know. They didn't know they need to fix it. They didn't know they need to patch this agent because they had no clue that this agent was installed on their server. It was mostly installed silently by Azure. And I think that was the big thing there, that cloud providers were, and actually we discovered later that this is not unique to Azure. Cloud providers tend to install agents on customers' virtual machines. And this is a very complicated scenario for cloud users, because by the shared responsibility model of cloud providers, the customer is responsible, the user is responsible for everything running in their virtual machine. But if the cloud provider installed a piece of software in my virtual machine, who is responsible for updating it? Who is responsible for managing vulnerabilities for it? Is it me? Is it the cloud provider? And that was a big thing, because Microsoft released a patch on that Patch Tuesday, but still all customers, or most customers, were still left affected. So there was a bit of a community discussion about it, and eventually Microsoft did an amazing work, and they managed to update almost all OMI agents across all customers. It was a few days after the release, but it was good job by Microsoft. So that basically was the the OMI issue. For the ChaosDB, it was a total different vulnerability. It was a vulnerability also in Microsoft's cloud, in Azure, in a managed service that's called Cosmos DB. The Cosmos DB is a managed database solution that is used by a lot of companies in the industry. And also this vulnerability was also found by Nir and Sagi from my team. They managed to execute code on a Jupyter Notebook instance that was dedicated to our user. In Cosmos, the Jupyter Notebook is a cool tool to provide visibility into the database data, to perform sophisticated queries. But one of the features of Jupyter Notebook is to execute code. It's a feature. It's not even a vulnerability. And what they discover is that they can leverage this code execution functionality and break out of the isolation of the managed service and to access other databases. And that was like, I think the first pattern of the cross vulnerabilities that we see today, not just published by Wiz, also published by other talented researchers, where managed services in the cloud are each one of them is isolated in a different way with a different architecture, and because there is no framework on how to isolate those, researchers tend to find it's very sophisticated vulnerabilities, but they tend to find a way to break out of the isolation and to access the data of other customers.
Gosh, that sounds pretty scary in terms of the impact that must have, or potential impact that could have. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, when we reported those vulnerabilities to the cloud providers, they took it very seriously. And they actually analyzed the key points of what we discovered. For example, the hygiene of those environments, or the lack of network isolation in those environments. They took those patterns and they checked that across all their managed services to ensure that these attacks could never happen again. So it's still working. I believe it's still work in progress. Microsoft released something about it a few months ago in their blog about their new approach of cloud security. And cloud providers also, they are like when it comes to isolation, to tenant isolation, they are the industry leaders. The cloud was built upon the promise that one resource could not be like that. Customers share the same resources, and one customer cannot access the data of other customer. So they have a lot of experience in that, and I believe that this particular case, it's a very good evidence how independent researchers can actually assist and make the cloud a safer place by enlightening those issues and finding those issues before attackers find them.
You're sat there, you've discovered this enormous exploit, really. What was going through your mind when you first discovered that? How did you feel? What were you thinking to yourself?
Okay, so for most vulnerabilities that one discover, you have this insight, you feel like you found something, but you are still not sure. And this is the moment when your dreams are just like starting to I don't know, like you start get excited because like, wow, maybe I found something. And then there is a list of things that I need to check. Like, okay, let's see, does it work in that way? Does it work that way? And it takes time to understand that you actually find something. But at that moment, it's like the most exciting time. And usually as a researcher, you have those periodically, you have those doing your job. And a lot of times you are disappointed to discover that it's not a vulnerability. You believe you find something, but it's not there, or the developer was doing a verification, or they add a condition that checks that, and you just missed it, and the vulnerability does not exist. So being a vulnerability researcher, it's like being on a roller coaster. You are like sometimes, doing your research, you have those ups and downs until you find something, and at that moment it's like. This is why we're doing that. For that moment when you feel so excited about what you found, and once you understand like how impactful it is, how serious it is, this is the things that makes me excited in my day-to-day research.
You mentioned there you're going through that experience of like maybe a developer's added this subroutine, this kind of we're going to walk through and test this, and it's not actually a real vulnerability. Do you believe most of the vulnerabilities in modern software are the result of carelessness, or is it just that happens during software development? We've got such a broad dispersed team working on this project that inevitably there will be an error.
It's very difficult. I mean, in order to answer your question, I will need to categorize like vulnerability types, and each vulnerability type has different cause. So, and it would be very difficult. But I will say mainly, I don't think sometimes there is vulnerabilities in software because lack of attention, because not caring enough. In order to develop a secure software, it needs to be code reviewed. You need to have good tests. You need to do casual penetration testings. And if you don't do that, there is no code that is clean of vulnerabilities. So the way to find those vulnerabilities is to search for them and to assure the software is well designed. Yet it will be very difficult to find all vulnerabilities. So a better approach would be to sandbox your application or try to separate it, to try to make vulnerabilities less impactful. I think most vulnerabilities are, also very good developers introduce very embarrassing vulnerabilities. It will be very difficult to, and I'm talking about software vulnerabilities. It will be very difficult to find a way, like a perfect methodology to write no vulnerable code. Vulnerabilities that are not software vulnerabilities, this is another aspect.
Who's responsible in that situation where a cloud provider has provided software for the service versus a tenant who's using that cloud application? How do you approach that conversation with your customers to say, did you know this is your responsibility, or understanding that responsibility model?
Yeah, so with customers, it's pretty clean actually. They want to be secure. And usually they don't care if it's the vendor responsibility or it's in their responsibility. If there is a security issue, it's their problem. and they will do everything to fix it. And if it's big customers, they will put a lot of pressure about the cloud provider, and they will make sure that it's fixed and that the process will be will work better. It will be easier to configure. So the shared responsibility model, it's a very complicated thing. It's I mean, since the cloud, I believe shared responsibility it's not limited to the cloud, but since we start talking about cloud security a lot of time ago, we start talking about the shared responsibility model. What the security responsibilities of the cloud provider against the customers, and it's an ongoing. I mean, there is some things that are very clear. For example, me as a customer, I don't have access to the hardware. So the cloud provider must take care of the hardware security and also the physical security, right? But when it becomes, and me as a customer, as a user, I will take responsibility to manage my identities the best way, and to not expose sensitive data externally, like publicly exposing data. And the complicated parts are always in the middle. And it's very difficult. I mean, usually, it's a bad conversation both for customers and for the cloud providers. Like once there is something in the middle, it's both sides are upset.
Well, yeah, brings me nicely into a question there about companies that do get upset. Obviously, if you as an organization has developed this amazing platform for others to use, do those organizations ever get upset or angry that you have found a vulnerability and you've shared that information?
So we had very, very few cases that the way we publish things were criticized, sometimes by the community, sometimes by some of our customers. We take it very seriously. We take the feedback. We love that we have feedback about how to publish, the right way to publish. When we publish things, we try to make it as much as useful for the community. We truly believe that we are doing the right thing. And whenever we get a feedback, we assess it. We try to understand if we did something that could endanger maybe a company, or that could maybe leave users at risk. This is something that we don't want to do. It's very important for us that when we do a public disclosure, after coordinating it with the vendor, it's very important for us to ensure that no customers will be affected and will be impacted by the disclosure. No users, no one from the community. We do our best for that.
I was just thinking as well, you've achieved so much at such a young age. What's next for you on your to-do list? Where are you going now? What's still driving you, and what excites you about the future?
Wow, it's a very good question. I can share that it's very difficult for me to look into the future. Even like 2 years from now, I have no idea where I'll be. Right now, I'm having a lot of fun in Wiz. It feels like a family, so I will be there as long as it stays and as long as it feels like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that since a very early age, I understood that I came to conclusions that I want to do impact and to do good in the world. So and it must be impactful. So I will definitely continue to chase this road and to try to do good things with as much impact as possible.
Amazing, a very noble mission. I look forward to kind of following you and seeing how that happens. What on that kind of follow front, are you a fan of any kind of conferences, any talks, or any great resources you can signpost our listeners to? Is there good places that you learn from?
Wow, that's a good one. Let's see. So first of all, I'm going to all the conferences, not all the big ones. So I will be speaking in RSA this year. I will also submit some talks to Black Hat this summer. There is a very, very good conference that's called Forward CloudSec. It's a very small conference. It happens once a year. It's for cloud security professionals. And you can check it out. It's FWD CloudSec. I will submit my sessions there as well. I hope I will get accepted. So this is like a niche conference, but it's exploding. Like last year there was, I think, 100 people. This year it's going to be 300 people, and it's growing rapidly. And regarding like getting knowledge, so I'm still using Twitter. So there is a lot of good people on Twitter that shares cloud security, knowledge and cloud security issues and cloud security like problems to talk about. And there is also a very nice Slack channel that's called the Cloud Security Forum. I think Scott Piper is the one that runs it. It's a very good community. There is thousands of people there talking about everything related to cloud. It's a good spot also to meet people, to make relationships with people in the industry, but also to read about the recent pitfalls of cloud security engineers.
I was going to ask you as well. What would be some advice you would give to kind of 12-year-old you? Somebody listening to our podcast who's at the start of their interest and curiosity around cybersecurity. What would you say to them?
Okay, first of all, cybersecurity, it's very simple. You always need to, once you understand how it's work, a lot of people think that hacking is like a magic. But no, it's very simple. There is very, very simple vulnerabilities that is very, very simple vulnerabilities to exploit. So I would advise to start with the very easy things. I started with developing website. After you develop a website, it's very easy to spot the areas where maybe it could be manipulated, where the software could be misbehave. So I will recommend learning like basic client side and backend development. I don't know. I started with exploiting SQL injections. I'm not sure if SQL injection is still a thing, but I can assure you that 15 years ago it was like the most common security issue, and it's something that is very important actually is to gain confidence, to start with easy things, with easy security issues that are easy to exploit, and to start gaining confidence that you were able to exploit it, report it. Bug bounty is a great way to start. You have a huge playground of a lot of good companies that they ask users to report security issues, and they even pay them. So it could be a good place to start. I will mention that software development I think it's critically important for good hackers. So if you want to be a good hacker, learn how to develop software.
Sadly brings me into my last question, which is a question that's left from another guest on our podcast. And the question is, what's something that has now happened in our industry that you would never have predicted 10 years ago? And what change do you think will happen in the next 10 years that's going to surprise people?
Yeah, I will answer the boring answer. And I would say AI. 10 years ago, I didn't know what AI is. Nowadays, I use ChatGPT like on a daily basis. English is not my native language. It helps me write things. It helps me do presentations, do Twitter tweets, writing emails. And I think the potential of ChatGPT is huge. Not ChatGPT, like AI in general. So yeah, it's a boring answer because it's, probably there is a lot. I know nothing about AI, so probably there is many good people that will mention specific things or specific industry. For me, it's magic. If you would ask me this question 2 years ago, I would say that back like a lot of years ago, I was very fascinated by decentralized networks. I actually studied all the BitTorrent stack, how peers find each other, and I really like the resilience of a decentralized network. So it was very intuitive for me to believe that like blockchain could be like a great something that could, I don't know, change the world. And I think it did. And I think also blockchain also has a lot of potential, but not as the newly AI scene where we see very, very, very cool things.
Absolutely incredible, the leaps and bounds OpenAI has made in such a short space of time. And shout out to Mira Murati, the Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, for exposing the entire world to those amazing leaps forward. So, no, fantastic answer, and thank you for sharing that perspective as well. I really appreciate it. Well, that was everything I had. So, I mean, the last thing for me to do is to really thank you for giving us your time and taking a step away from hunting vulnerabilities and responsibly disclosing them, and sharing some of your story with our listeners. Really appreciate it, Shir, and thank you so much for coming on and being part of this.
Thank you very much, Karl. I had fun being here. And thank you very much.